Hi, it's Drake. I'm going to make another video of three poets. One's going to be old, one's going to be less old, and one is, the debut was last year. So, the first one I'm going to start with is Tate, and the title of the poem is Stranger. This is the village where the funeral stilted its dusty march over deep ruts, up the hillside covered with queen's lace, to the patch of weeds known finally to all. Of her virtues large tongues were loud, as I, a stranger, trudged the streets, gay with huckstering, loud whispers from a few sly wags who squeezed a humor from the shroud. For this was death. I should never see these men again, and yet, like the swiftness of remembered evil, an issue of, for conscience say, the cold heart of death was beating in my brain, a new figuration of an old phenomenon. This is the village where women walk the streets, selling eggs, breasts ungathered, hands like rawhide. Of their virtues, the symbol can be washtubs, but when they die, it is a time of singing. And then the symbol changes with a change of place. Let the wags wag as the pall-bearers climb the hill. Let a new slab look off into the sunset. The night drops down with sullen grace. Tate was one of the Southern fugitives, and he was a friend of Hart Crane. I read that one on my computer, and then here I have the bookstore near me they had a good sale, and I got this collection here, New Spaces by Joel Oppenheimer by the Black Sparrow Press. And yeah, as it says on here, he's poems 1975 to 1983, and I guess he was associated with the Black Mountain Poets. I read that online. But this was it was the second poem I turned to. I'm going to read them in opposite order of how I read them, but this is the first one I'm going to read. It's called Waking in Bed by a Ringing Telephone. Whose call this is, I think I know. Her voice is in Toronto, though. She does not see me lying here, naked with a need to go. Her little ears must think it queer to hear me cough and wheeze so clear, as lungs wake up and rattle shake, the nicest waking of the year. She gives my ears for myself's sake the sense that this is no mistake. The outer sounds I have to leap are starting trucks and screeching brake. Her words are lovely, dark and deep, so we have promises to keep, and miles to go before we sleep, and miles to go before we sleep. And this one, this is the first one I read of his, and it got stuck in my mind. It's called Life Studies. The outer surface of the thigh, when flexed, shows a groove longitudinally which corresponds to the iliotibial band. The stroking of the inner interior aspect of the upper thigh of a woman leads to Geigel's reflex in Poupart's ligament. In men, this is known as the cremasteric reflex. I learned all this as we stood in the bookstore watching women ride bicycles up the slight incline of the street outside from my friend the owner, who translates medical texts and thus has much to teach. I saw that the women's breasts turned into dugs as they leaned over the handlebars, so I was reminded of Mother Wolf, her dugs hanging down to feed the hungry twins, Romulus and Remus, before they built us Rome. Our other friend is much more primitive and hopelessly obsessed with muscles of the ass, which ball themselves to fight the uphill grade. He contents himself with such lascivious thoughts. This was a pleasant afternoon entertainment. The next day I slept through the bright sun and was awakened harshly by linguistics. A neighbor screamed, "Please come in." "Come back in, God damn it! Please come back in." Don't be a fucking cunt asshole. For God's sake, come back into the house. I don't care how many rags you got on. Please come in. I want to talk to you. She had been sitting in the car warming it up. The motor slowed and stopped. The car door opened and slammed. The house door opened and slammed. They were both inside. I was awake and startled, no longer watching, safe with friends, learning. I had been enlisted in a private war. And for that whole month, their car stayed parked, and I never once saw them. And the girls on bicycles kept going up the hill, and we kept watching from the bookstore. So that's a little funny poem there. And this last one here was, like I said, published last year, 2016. And it's poems by Daniel Nadler. It's called Lacunae, 100 Imagined Ancient Love Poems. And I'll just read a couple and then I'll say what I know about it. I'll just read the first 3 or 4. You hear the sun in the morning through closed shutters. As you sleep, the early sky is colored in fish scales, and you open your eyes like a street already lined with fruit. Your lips are as full as a wound guarded in battle. Your skin is the color of my eyelids when the sun passes through. The sea takes my shape as I float in it, but your hair falls all around you, like the paths of gravity made visible. You are as happy as a water wheel when the earth is flooding. Beside you I sleep with difficulty, a cherry rolling along the stem of its thought. Perpetual wings of the moistened eyelashes, I waited for you like vines around a house that was never built. My lips are shy, like a candle that will not flicker. So what I read about this is the idea behind the poems. Instead of doing like sort of a literary hoax style, he wrote, he admitted that they were imagined ancient love poems. And the way he imagined it is that there are gaps in ancient Sanskrit poetry, the lacunae, there are lacunae in the poetry. And he imagined that he was writing them and it was actually very well written. He did an interview. The interview was like well spoken, well written. And he talked about his method for the poems. And he said that I think he went on a trip with his girlfriend or wife or something. And he wanted to write poems talking about the sky and the landscape, the trees. But he felt that keeping in mind the last few thousand years of poetry, there was too much baggage to talk about those as it is. So he wanted to sort of clear all that away. And he felt the best way to do that is to write imagined ancient poems. Because he mentioned the Homer's wine-dark sea. And how if someone today had not read Homer, but they mentioned how the sea looked wine-dark, it would not matter if they had read Homer or not. Homer has claimed it. So he imagined that these were the ancient love poems. But what I like most about it is the images he uses. Here's another one I just randomly turned to. I guarded your sleep like a young cat who hunts down dreams that climb out of floorboards in the dead of midnight. I'm sorry I found it hard to stay awake during breakfast. They're very good, actually. I've been trying to find more contemporary stuff, and it's been very difficult. Much more difficult than finding good old stuff. But that was definitely one of them. So hopefully you guys liked these poems. If you have any poems you've read recently that are good, let me know. Death is a gang boss.